In the analysis video for this task, we came up with this flowchart. It took us some time to come up with it, but it is going to benefit us now that we are trying to implement it, because now we know exactly what we need to do to solve the task. So the first thing I'm going to do is to create a new project or a new script. And now that we have the script, let's see, according to our plan, what do we need to do? We need to create two loops. They are going to be nested, so we have one outer loop and one inner loop. I'm going to start by following this and writing the code for it. So here we go. And if we just stop here and see what did we do, we have done these two and these two. And as we have said before, the 0 here initialize it to 0, and increasing it, it's going to be done automatically by the for loop when we're using the range here. So we see that we start at 0 and we end at 10, or less than 10. So it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And the same for x in the inner loop. Alright, so what is the next step to do? Oh, okay, we are going to display something on the screen. And what are we going to display? X times y. Okay, let's do that. Okay, so we display x times y. And I also say that after each thing that I print, each string that I print, I don't want it to add a new line, because we are going to do that manually after having completed the first loop. So that is why we have this bit here. So after having completed this loop, we add a new line. Okay, let's try to run it and see what happens. And we can see it doesn't quite look as it looks in the example we got in the task. There are, for example, there is no space in between the numbers here, and there seems to be a lot of zeros here. But let's start with the spacing. We need to format our string in some way. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to add the formatting here to say that, all right, I want it to be four characters, so the width is going to be 4 spaces. So if we run it again, we see that, all right, each of the numbers is taking up 4 spaces, so it looks a lot better, but we still have the zeros here and the numbers does not really match. So what is the problem here? Well, we can see that our loops start at 0, and 0 times 0, yeah, that's going to be 0. And even when we increase x in the inner loop here to be 1, for example, 1 times 0 is still 0. So we have to take that into account. So I'm going to say, all right, we start at 0 in both of them, but I want them to start at 1. So each time that I multiply, I will increase it by 1 here. And I can do it this way. And if we try to think about what we did, all right, so the first time we come into the loop, y is 0 and x is 0. But here instead I say, all right, take that 0, add 1 to it, so it's now 1. And for y, do the same. It is 0 because we set it to 0 to start with, but add 1 to it. So now it's 1 times 1. So if we run it, we see that, all right, we get the correct output. So now we could say that we are finished with the task. We have generated the output that we're looking for. But it's always good to take a step back and see, all right, can I do this in a slightly different or slightly better way? And actually, we can modify it a little bit. And we see if I modify my loops, so I say that they start at 1 and they run until they're less than 11, so the last number is going to be 10. So start at 1 and go all the way up to 10 and include 10. I can simplify my code in here so that it says x times y, which is much easier to read. So if someone would read the script and had no idea before what it is doing, it's easier to read here and say, all right, it's taking x times y. So if we run it again, so I just did it here, but if we run it again, we see that the output is the expected. So we didn't break anything, but we took a step back and looked at the code. Can I simplify it? And here is one way to do that. So what can we take with us from this? Of course, we can remember how to use nested loops and how we can modify the range to suit us, but also that after we are finished, it's a good idea to reflect on the code that we wrote and see if we can come up with a better and cleaner solution that is easier for the reader to understand. Another thing to take with us from this task is that when we did our analysis, we spent quite some time with coming up with this solution, with the plan. But we see now that we implement it from the plan, it goes much quicker. If we wouldn't have done the analysis to begin with, we might have struggled with how to come up with the code. But now that we had a plan, it was much easier.